Call to order the meeting of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board of Managers, January 26, 2017. All managers are present. I wanted to point out before we get to the agenda approval that there are 5 really interesting information items here in our packet, and to thank staff from Research and Monitoring and Education for those reports. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Rognus and Becker, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
On the consent agenda, we have approval of the minutes of the January 12th board meeting and approval of check registers, the general checking account, the surety account, and the 325 Blake Road checking account. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I did not see a surety account or 325 Blake Road, so I'll move approving the general checking account.
Second.
The motion was for the consent agenda. The motion I asked for, I guess. But you're asking to remove those from the consent agenda, Manager Miller?
Yeah.
Okay. So 6.2 and 6.3 we'll go down to 11.3 and 4.
I'll move the consent agenda as modified.
Thank you, Manager Becker. Is there a second?
Second.
Manager Shackleton, second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I have a very brief report. I attended the 6 Mile Creek Halsted Bay partnership planning meeting last week. It was very well attended. There was a quick recap of previous meetings, updates on the Carver County financing and some watershed meetings, and then a good discussion of the draft purpose statement for 6 Mile Halsted and an overview of the plan structure, and really a good weigh in by the people there. It was a good meeting. Manager Olson was there as well. And then I've had some communication with Sharon Klump, who is finalizing the questionnaires that we'll be getting for the administrator's performance review. And I might as well just roll into talking about Metro Mod. There were reports on the stormwater reuse project that's being headed up by the Minnesota Department of Health, and a panel discussion. There was also a presentation on the Minnesota Stormwater Research Council, which is an informal organization of watershed districts looking for pooling money for good research projects. They will be looking for some support for that. There was a person there from the MnDOT who said that when there are linear projects and multiple watershed districts involved, she wished that they could have some agreement about requirements. So Mary Texter from Capital Region Watershed said, easy, just take the most strict ones, and then there was a lot of backpedaling. She hadn't thought of that possibility, apparently. It wasn't the answer she wanted. That was amusing. I'll mention just a couple of the agency reports. DNR representative talked about the buffer maps. If I understand correctly, the second version's out and comments are due by the 31st of January. I didn't follow through to make sure that was correct, but I think that's what she said. And Minnesota Department of Health talked about source water protection grants for wellhead, or in the case of Minneapolis and St. Paul, source water, and encouraging watershed districts and cities to collaborate. Last, I'll mention there was a report from managers Perry Forster and Mary Texter, who chaired the strategic planning process. That will soon be handed off to the transition committee. They'll have a report on expected dues and maybe other matters by the March legislative briefing meeting, and by the summer meeting they will have things to approve, plans for us to approve. They intend to have the successor to Ray Bone hired before the annual meeting, which starts November 30th. And Harry made the comment that the Metro Watershed District will probably carry most of the cost. So what I want to do, most of the cost. So what I want to do is ask Harry and Mary to make sure that we get some data before that March legislative meeting so that we can talk about it before it goes off to that meeting.
Absolutely.
So I'll be talking with Perry. Manager Miller, the Planning and Policy Committee report?
Yeah, all the managers who were present except for Manager Flex, there is a very complete report on Phase 1 synthesis and considerations that we're going to be discussing at the retreat. That Council Lewis Smith is going to be managing that discussion. And if you got any concerns that you want addressed at the retreat that you find in the draft report, call Lewis.
That was also at the meeting. Oh,
Thank you,
Okay.
Manager Miller. We'll go to item 10.1, permit 16-631, Woodridge Church Medina.
got it.
Ms. Workin.
Yeah. Dead Indian. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
And then I think if you don't want your notes to show up,
I do. Yeah.
they might show up on that one. You have to do it through like other phone.
This one. Managers, I apologize. I've never gone first before.
Somehow or another, we knew that.
It was a setup.
There's like a thing with two different screens that you can view it on.
You're not worried about the aspect. You can just
Here they
print
come.
it as it is. You don't need to fill the whole screen.
There you go.
That'll work just fine.
Okay. There's a, I don't remember what it is.
So,
Go to, do that and then go to slideshow.
Okay. We can just go like
There we
this.
go.
Okay, great.
Great.
Thank you for your patience. President White, managers, tonight I am presenting on MCWD permit 16631. This is the Woodridge Church's application for a building addition at their property at 1500 County Road 24 in Medina. This permit is before the managers for consideration because they are requesting a variance from the stormwater management rule. No comments were received during the public comment period. This project is located towards the northern boundary of the watershed district. It is part of the Deer Hill Pond minor subwatershed and Long Lake Creek subwatershed. It is on a 19.7 acre parcel, although the church also owns an 8 acre parcel immediately adjacent on the west. Under existing conditions, there are 3.54 acres of impervious surface, mainly from the church and the associated parking lot. The area of interest for this project is denoted in the star. That's where there's a current patio and a sidewalk that connects the patio to the parking lot. The applicant is proposing to replace the patio with a new building addition and then reconnect that building addition to the parking lot with a sidewalk. They're also constructing the required stormwater management infrastructure. This will add 0.22 acres of impervious surface. Because this project is disturbing more than 5,000 square feet of soil, they need an erosion control permit. They are proposing all standard erosion control BMPs, including silt fence, inlet protection, permanent vegetative stabilization. they meet the requirements of the erosion control rule. Because they're proposing a change in impervious surface, they also fall under the stormwater management rule. Based on the amount of soil that they're disturbing and the change in increase of impervious surface, they're required to treat the new impervious surface. Manager Olson, I apologize for getting up in your space with this. So kind of going over the existing and proposed drainage patterns on the site. The site has a lot of storm sewer pipe, but it doesn't have any stormwater treatment as we define it. Under existing conditions, stormwater from the patio is routed to an eastern wetland through some storm sewer pipe. A small section of the parking lot up in the north flows through sheet flow into the southern wetland as well. But the majority of the site drains to the west to a wetland, partly through surface runoff, but mainly through a storm sewer pipe that is routed under the parking lot. And that's what captures the existing building. Under the proposed plan, they're replacing the patio with a new building, and then they're capturing the roof runoff, so pretty much all of the runoff from the building, and they're connecting their roof system into the existing storm sewer pipe. And then this area will continue to drain to the east wetland through that storm sewer pipe that's already existing. The big change is that they are proposing to take a section of the northeastern part of the parking lot offline from that storm sewer pipe system and direct it to a filtration basin and treat it, and then that filtration basin eventually ends up in the west wetland. And the issue here is what they're proposing is to swap out the treatment of this new impervious surface with treatment of currently untreated existing impervious surface. And so they're proposing this because they have very heavy clay soils, so they have to do filtration, but they don't have the required grade or distance in order to capture the new runoff through filtration without ripping up a lot of existing impervious surface.
So where would the filter go?
So the filtration basin is right here.
Okay.
So this is the new building.
Yep.
They're going to connect that through the roof drain into the existing storm sewer pipe. So it'll go untreated to the west wetland. But instead, since they're not treating this because they can't, they're going to treat a comparable amount
At the
that's
parking lot.
currently untreated in a different section of the property.
Okay.
So this swap is a variance from a literal implementation of Section 5B of the Stormwater Management Rule that says that they have to treat the new area of impervious surface. Based on the amount of impervious surface that they're adding, they have to provide 801 cubic feet of abstraction. Through this swap, they are providing 1,693 cubic feet of abstraction through filtration. The district only gives half credit for abstraction through filtration, so they're treating 846.5 cubic feet. And what's important is that this 846.5 cubic feet of water that's abstracted is from the same water body that the new impervious surface is being directed to as well. Because this is a variance, we'd also looked directly at their phosphorus loading and found that they were decreasing phosphorus rates into both the eastern and western wetlands. And so the rates are decreasing to the eastern wetland because there's decreased impervious surface being directed to it, and being decreased to the western wetland because they're having this filtration. They're also decreasing rates to both the eastern and western wetlands and off the site in compliance with our rules. Because they're directing more impervious surface to the western wetland, we did look for impacts in bounce and inundation and found that all bounce and inundation impacts were in compliance with NCWD guidelines for a Manage 1 wetland. Therefore, even though they're not treating the exact new impervious surface, the intentions of the stormwater management rule are achieved because they're abstracting the required amount of rainfall from the receiving water body. The same amount of untreated water is being captured from the same immediate water body, and therefore the performance standards are met. Because the stormwater management rule was triggered, the wetland protection rule was also triggered. Medina is the Wetland Conservation Act, LGU, within their boundaries, so they issued the wetland boundary and type notice of decision. 4 wetlands were delineated within the church's property, 3 of which are downstream of activity and so require buffers under MCWD's buffer management rule. They're all classified as managed 1 wetlands, and so they've all been given assigned a buffer width of 40 feet. Because of existing site constraints, they weren't able to meet that 40 feet all the way around, but they were able to use buffer averaging, and they comply with the buffer averaging requirements set forth by MCWD's wetland protection rule, which allows them to go down to 50% in certain areas and out to 200% in other areas, as long as the total buffer area is the same as a uniform 40-foot buffer width. There is a small amount of disturbance to the buffer of wetland 1 to place the outlet for the filtration basin, and they are revegetating that with native buffer seed mix in compliance with MCWD's buffer management rule. So in summary, this project triggers the district's erosion control, stormwater management, wetland protection, and variance rule. However, we feel that the variance rule, they meet the intention of the stormwater management rule, and they have unique site constraints that were not caused by their own doing. Staff recommends approval of this project with the conditions and stipulations listed in the permit report. And then before we begin discussion, as was discussed in the PPC meeting earlier this afternoon, and as managers are well aware, we are undergoing a strategic planning process to align our work with our department's mission, vision, values, and goals. And something that was really identified in the permitting department is this need for increased efficiency of rule administration. Part of that we're hoping to address through a framework for rule clarification for board input and approval. And this will address how we work with rules that the interpretation is somewhat unclear, or projects like this that don't neatly fit into the rule, and how we address them either at administrative, policy, or rule revision levels. Great. So thank you for your time.
Is there a motion to approve the permits and variance?
So moved.
Manager Olson, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Manager Rognus. Questions of Ms. Workin? Manager Olson?
This might be to both of you. When I see that they are increasing the hard surface with a roof, and I see that they're now going to treat a parking lot hard surface that wasn't treated before, I'd much rather have rainwater come off a roof into a wetland than parking lot water go off into the wetland, because you've got automotive pollution and everything else that goes along with it. So that's, I'm reading that right? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Rachel, maybe the other thing you want to point to too is just if you can demonstrate how water runs through the site, where it goes to, that also helps people understand the end point. But if you go to your aerial, you have your wetland.
Oh, sure.
Just kind of show how they're going to the same resource.
Right, so all of the wetlands on this site are interconnected. So this wetland 1 drains north to wetland 2, which is a public water wetland. Wetland 3 also drains north, so they meet directly in the same area as they leave the property. And that's something that we really took into account when evaluating this variance. We wouldn't want to approve something where protection to one water body was given at the expense of another, but the fact that they're all draining to the same immediate water body makes a big difference in our evaluation.
Thank you.
Is there an eventual creek connection, or?
Long Lake.
It flows, oh,
I was gonna say, you could go to your below, I think you have that upper watershed in there. If you went to the restaurant.
Slide 2.
okay, great. Yeah, so
Okay.
the yellow is their property, and so they're going kind of north over outside of this frame, but then eventually hitting the Deer Hill Pond, looping in to the southeast. and then hitting the Deer Hill Pond, and then eventually.
That's what I was doing. I saw Rachel doing this. So it goes up, and it comes back around, kind of combines with Holy Name Lake, and then it goes through a series of wetlands down here. Woolsfield Woods is over here, and then kind of comes through and back down the line.
Thank you for being
Thank you, Mr.
my
Mayor.
arm.
It was a tall guy for once in my
We're good for something.
You go home, write in his journal. He's a tall guy today. Are there other questions for Ms. Workin? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
We will go to Resolution 17-006. I see Mr. Lochner and Ms. Cater.
President White, Board of Managers, I'm here before you tonight to request the authorization of the renewal of the contract for the Watershed Association Initiative with the Freshwater Society for the amount of $25,000 for the upcoming calendar year. With just kind of give you a broad overview of the Watershed Association Initiative, it's been in existence for 10 years and it's moving into its 11th year here in 2017. And so we've seen a lot of progress and a lot of great things happen across the Watershed District with our lake and river organizations over that time. And just a couple of milestones in connection with the Watershed Association Initiative, otherwise known as WAI. Within the last year, we presented the education work plan, which within that had the $25,000 amount is part of our work within the education program. And also for this last year, it's been a really a great opportunity as we've gone through our strategic planning process to really assess all our programs, and WAI was one of them, and where we had the opportunity to have a lot of great conversations with staff here at the Watershed District. And I should introduce Miss Jen Cater, who's with the Freshwater Society. She's our organizer that works with the WAI, and Jen has been on board for about a year and a half now with Freshwater Society. So as we've looked at the strategic planning process in looking at WAI, we're really excited about this upcoming calendar year, how we can further connect the WAI to the Watershed District goals, how we can further support our programs in areas such as research and monitoring, our planning, as well as our education and communications programs. So I'm going to turn it over to Jen to talk a little bit about the year that we just passed in 2016, as well as kind of looking forward on what we should expect with the programs this upcoming calendar year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, Ms. Cater.
Thank you. President White, Board of Managers, thanks for the opportunity for coming in and having the chance to speak with you tonight. I know I recognize a few faces in the room, so I've had a chance to meet a few of you, and for a couple of you, it's the first time. So I'm excited to have this opportunity to have face-to-face connection and tell you a little bit about the work that we've been up to in the last year. For those of you who haven't met me yet, a little bit of background about who I am. I'm currently, outside of my work with Freshwater Society, wrapping up my master's degree in urban and regional planning with a focus on planning for changing climate and looking specifically at the intersection between community-based planning, water resources, and climate change. Needless to say, I am really excited about the work that I do with WAI because of the overlap that's there with those interests. I'm also a master water steward. I went through the program in its first iteration back in 2013, and that program just really stoked the fire for my interest in working on water resource issues. It actually resulted in a career change away from focusing on soils to be focusing on water. So thank you for supporting that program too. So. And in addition, as far as some of the background that I have in working with boards as well, I also chair a nonprofit organization that focuses on environmental issues and served on an environmental commission with the city of Minneapolis and chaired their water subcommittee there. So I'm happy to talk more about that, but you guys aren't here to hear about me, so I'll switch over to talking about WAI. As Darren mentioned, the program's been around for over 10 years, and in that time, one thing that's been true all the way through has been this focus on capacity building and helping groups figure out how they can most effectively spend their limited time and energy to achieve the outcomes that they've set for themselves, but also the outcomes that their partners have. That work can be anything from helping a group form a structure, and a structure that works for them, helping them think through things like bylaws, which can seem very intimidating and daunting if it's the first time you've looked at them, to doing some strategic goal setting and trying to figure out how they want to be spending their time, what success looks like for them, and what some of the barriers or concerns are that they have that they'll be needing to overcome. That also could be things like applying for or attracting funds, telling their story, and being able to clearly articulate how they would spend resources if they were coming their way. That background, as far as that goes, that can be any different sort of application. Groups are at different points in their life cycle when they're working with WAI. We have about 30 lake associations, neighborhood associations, and other groups of unorganized individuals spread all the way across the watershed district, from all the way out in 6 Mile, all the way to where the falls hit the ground. So it spreads the entire breadth of the watershed district, and each group has, of course, different needs. Each sub-watershed, of course, within that, there's different needs that are taking place. So the work ends up being conducted in one-on-one group facilitation, education offerings, electronic communication, or even just helping to provide connections to resources, helping folks understand who some of their political contacts may be that they can work with to meet the goals that they have, and help them understand that relationships and good relationships are a good thing for achieving some of those goals, and helping folks understand how they can, even if they really disagree with the person sitting on the other side of the table, how they can still work with them to move towards achieving the goals that they've set out for themselves. What the program is not is directly telling the groups what to do. We use a form of counseling called appreciative advising, where we're helping groups clearly articulate what it is that they want to see happen, so that they have buy-in in the process, buy-in in the outcomes. And as we're working with them, there's an internal self-motivation that's taking place. That's not me saying, this is what you had for your to-do list, how are you doing on your to-do list? They're checking in with themselves. And that sort of momentum is something that eventually leads to a point where I don't really need to be involved, and the WAI isn't really as strong of a presence as it has been. We have that happening right now, where groups that have been around for a long time and are really strong and motivated, you all know Christmas Lake and Joe Schneider. Joe doesn't really call me asking for help. I'm usually calling Joe and saying, hey, there's this group that's working on something that you worked on 2 years ago. Would you be willing in talking to them, so that there's a peer-to-peer learning exchange that takes place, which again, that adds another level of trust, where they're not necessarily looking to me to have all the answers, but they know that I can help put them in touch with someone who can. And when they're having this peer-to-peer connection, at some point they'll start talking to each other more than they're talking to me. So we really want to try and encourage and incentivize that. And in the last year, it's been a lot of this one-on-one. And one of the things that we for sure want to do in 2017 is really emphasize this peer-to-peer opportunity, create opportunity where that's actually going to be facilitated and encouraged, on top of a number of other things that we are taking a look at. Like I said, we do have 30 different groups. They're in different spots along their lifetime. And a lot of what we did talk about in this year was having this evaluation and trying to figure out, this program's been around for 10 years. It has met its goals over those 10 years. Are those goals the same goals that the goals that we had before? Are those the same goals that we should have now? The way that we've spent time before, is that the same way we should be doing it now? Asking those really important and critical questions to make sure that we're still focused. And like Darren said, with the strategic planning that's been taking place, this has provided an opportunity for us to do our own strategic planning. And as that process continues to unfold and carry out, making sure that the work we're doing fits with the answers that you guys are coming up with in this process, as well as trying to figure out, are MCWD's goals the same? How are we going to be shifting them and changing them? And some of the things that are already coming out of this with this idea about integration, we're doing the same thing in recognizing that the program, as it stands, historically has had less direct contact with a broad swath of staff in the district. And this coming year, we're going to be more intentional about making sure that we're being strategic and having quarterly check-in opportunities to make sure that as opportunities come up, we recognize them and we can do something to move forward on them, and even more further, make sure that the resources that we're putting into this are being spent effectively. I have success stories galore and would be happy to share a bunch of those, but I want to pass it back to you, see if there's anything else that you want to cover, or if there's any questions, happy to take those.
Board of Managers, as Jen mentioned, just through these discussions, I think we're at a really great opportunity to just, assess the program and watch it evolve and make some strides in the upcoming year. And become more integrated, to have a stronger connection with our existing staff, and really to clarify the role of the Watershed Association initiative, and also the role of staff from our various departments and how we can support one another. So again, before you tonight is the request for renewal of the contract for the upcoming calendar year for $25,000, which is a contracted service with the Freshwater Society.
Thank you. Before discussion, is there a motion to approve Resolution 17006?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Questions? Manager Miller?
How many other watershed districts do you work with?
With this program specifically, none.
Okay.
This is
So you
specific to
devote
Minnehaha
100% of your
Creek.
time to this?
No, I do not.
What percent of your time do you devote?
In a given week, that changes fairly significantly. It can be anything from multiple full days to a handful of hours on one afternoon, depending on where we are in the year and what the demand is that's coming from the group. Right now, it's January. There's a number of folks who aren't around and a lot of folks who aren't thinking about water right now. But in the summer, it can become a lot more intensive, where I'll spend almost the entire week working with the group. So.
Manager Sheckler?
What kind of changes would you envision?
For the program?
Yeah.
So if you actually, scope of services, if you look at the one that's in front of you, the back side, I list out an entire list of new services. And a lot of this, so, sorry. A lot of the services that are listed on here, you'll see that there's a number that are existing that we want to carry through. That's a mix of proactive and not reactive, but responsive, and responding to the individual group's needs. A number of things that we put on here are coming from perceived or articulated needs, either from district staff or from the groups that we're working with. One of the biggest ones is having an education series that can be developed and used, whether that's something that we use online or if that's an in-person thing. Perhaps Master Water Stewards are leading those trainings with the groups, really focusing on things like a Watershed 101, just understanding how watershed science works. Every group and even individuals within the group, there's a mixed bag as far as how much knowledge groups have or individuals have about watershed science, and this would allow for everyone to be on the same page and hear the terminology. Included in that would also be things like how water is governed and talking about all the different levels and agencies. Because when you get groups starting to talk about something like working on a wetland, or Friends of Bass Lake and talking about how they want to actually go out onto the ice and start cutting up ice blocks and removing cattail chunks and things along those lines, and just saying, okay, here are all the actors that you might have to talk to if this is something that you're actually serious about, and just helping them understand the work that's involved from their end, but also have set expectations for what each group can do, too, so that they're not asking the watershed district to do something that the watershed district can't do, and then getting upset with the watershed district because they're not doing what they're asking. So that's something that we don't want to have happen. Another thing that's on here is a lot of what we do in person and through the one-on-one consultation and even some of the education events that we do, some of the things that come up in that are things that we could make readily available online. Over the last year, we've been trying to consolidate and collect a lot of that information and have it readily available when we do launch the website, but we have a full series of things that we're pulling together on model bylaws, how to write bylaws, how to think about your vision, questions that you should be asking when you get to a point in your life cycle where it's time to start evaluating, and pulling all those together. The next one that's on there, I mentioned the semi-regular peer-to-peer opportunities and hosting those and facilitating them, and creating opportunities for groups to network around specific issues or specific opportunities that they have where they want to talk to groups. And so that can happen across the watershed, but the next one down, really focusing on this idea of sub-watershed collaboration. Something that we've been doing with the Long Lake Waters Association, which is one of the new groups. Well, they tried starting that before, but they're back again. One of the new groups that we're working with, in the whole strategic planning process, when there was those sub-watershed meetings, they were just in awe of how all these different groups were connected, and it was one of the opportunities for them to really realize they already had been talking about this. Even their name reflects the waters idea. But realizing that they really do need to be working upstream and downstream if they're going to be successful with the goal that they have. So creating those opportunities to connect those groups so they can talk about them and start looking at things like leveraging resources. And then, like I mentioned before, holding quarterly meetings with the relevant staff that we've been working with over the last year, from water quality to planning, and talking through some of the different things that we're working on, questions that maybe staff have received so that there's an opportunity to discuss them as a full team and figure out next steps, but also things that I'm hearing from lake groups to be bringing them back to staff and seeing where there's opportunity to address or work on something there. And the last one on here, especially in geographic priority areas, just making myself available for drop-in conversation and hanging out in different parts throughout the watershed in case somebody does want to come on in. And that's something where we haven't had the opportunity to talk with the lake groups to fully work out the logistics on that, but it sounds like something that might be appreciated based on the comments that we've received so far. So that's a suite. It adds to the whole idea of this being a suite of services that are being provided. But the other thing that I just want to point out again too is because of the strategic planning process and our own strategic planning that we're doing as a group, this will be iterative. Part of the purpose of these quarterly meetings will be having the opportunity to have a check-in, talk about, okay, what's working of these new things that we're trying, what's not working, why, and having a conversation around what we want to continue forward, what we want to adjust, or if there's new opportunities that come up that address things that we're not addressing right now, making sure that we can think through what those look like and put them into action.
Other questions, Manager Plixt?
Could you just tell us a story about one of the things that you're most proud of accomplishing last year?
My answer changed as of last night.
Oh, okay.
So there's a lot that has been really just incredible about the last year. Like Darren said, I've been a part of this program for about a year and a half. And prior to this, I was working at Great River Greening, and one of the things that I really wanted to do was have an opportunity to have a lasting relationship with a group versus attracting them to events and then having to go on to the next event. And it's been great to be able to see the progress in individual groups, and one in particular, Friends of Lake Hiawatha. This group started, we had our first meeting December of 2015. That first meeting was trying to just collect things like, what do they love about the lake? What are they concerned about with the lake? And having that first basic conversation that would allow everyone who cared so deeply. And we had something around 30 people in the room having this conversation in small groups, and we facilitated that conversation. And from going from December of 2015 to where we are today, one of the things that we did in that first meeting, or from that first meeting and even the second meeting, was identify focus. So what do they want to work on? What sort of actions and strategies do they want to pursue? Who would they need to build relationships with? Who are the other stakeholders that weren't present that they need to get involved? What resources did they need? What did they need to do before they could do X, Y, Z? And included in that was develop a communications plan and having an identity and something that had branding on it. They've got a website, they've got a Facebook page, they have a logo, they have t-shirts with their logo on it. They wore them to the Minnehaha Creek watershed, the cleanup that took place this past summer. They coordinated a team of community members who were interested in going out there to work on trash removal, and one of the reasons why they got started was the trash removal. So there was definitely a lot of visibility around Sean Canati's work of going out and collecting trash, analyzing what was in it, and trying to develop a human story based on the trash, which is always a terrifying thought when I think about what I throw out. But some of the other things, one of the other things that got them started was the groundwater pumping from the golf course. And so these are a bunch of neighbors that were just concerned about the health of the lake, that really dug into groundwater, surface water interaction, dug into DNR permits, and just really tried to research as much of it as they could, and they continue to organize around this.
Is member of that group?
No.
Okay.
So, but they continue to follow that and promote the opportunities to go and engage and hear more from the park board or from the engineers when there's new reports that come out. And one of the things that's really interested them with the opportunity that was available with the flooded golf course, it's hard to think about it as being so optimistic. There's opportunities with the flooded golf course. but they really wanted to look at the ecosystem that was there and talk about what sort of plantings were there and the community benefit. And something that came through this process was wanting to see more trees, and specifically, if it was possible, a food forest. And a year ago, everyone was poo-pooing this idea of a food forest. Last night, the Minneapolis Park Board approved 250 new trees for the Hiawatha site, including 40 fruit trees. So as far as momentum, that's a year. That's a group that just got started and just seeing where it could go.
They're doing better than we are.
Do they have I'm sorry, do they have a planting plan? Or
I
they-
don't know about that yet. I just got a heads up from the coordinator saying we got 250 trees. So they're really excited about it, but I don't know. That's my question too. I'm like, so where are these gonna go?
Yeah,
So-
like if they do decide to turn off the pumps,
Yeah.
I've seen the flood maps.
Yeah, right. So, but it's exciting to see, the looks on their faces going from like, this is huge, overwhelming, we don't know how all these things work together, to seeing the communication plan, seeing the partnerships that they've developed. The other thing that they got, the Minneapolis Park Board at the end of the summer put in a trash catchment at the end of one of the outfalls into Lake Hiawatha. That was one of the first things that they wanted to work towards as a group, was build the relationships, build the momentum behind it, and see something happen. It ended up flooding out because of the high water levels and breaking off, but it was just to see that happen. That's huge for a group, especially in less than a year of its fledgling beginning. So I'm excited to see where the group goes from here. There's definitely a lot of momentum in the community, a lot of new attention being paid to how trash moves from the street to the water. That wasn't in the community before. And Sean himself will talk about the time that he dropped a ball down the drain in front of his house with his address on it, and then while he was going around picking up the trash, found the ball with his address on it. And just having those sorts of stories to tell really connects to the people in the community. So they've been partnering with a neighborhood association and doing a lot of work with the park board and trying to move things forward, and it's been exciting to see it happen. So, and then the other ones that are also really exciting are in your packet, so I'll just let you know the Long Lake Waters Association, and then the work we've been doing with the Lowry Hill East Neighborhood Association, and specifically Joe Knabley around salts. So.
Thank you. Other questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Ms. Cater. Mr. Lockman?
Thank you both. Thank you all very much.
Next item of business is the surety account and 325 Lake Road checking account.
There was no surety checks, so I had no report, but I found it in the package. It wasn't in the treasurer's package, it was in this folder. Yeah, so, and then the 325 Lake Road, we never have the checking account. I don't know why this says checking account, it's a report on the revenues and expenses. So I'm fine. Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, any discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Last item of business is the administrator's report. Mr. Erdahl.
Thank you, President White and managers. I have a few things to update everyone on. One is that the 2016 audit is underway, and our staff has already done a lot of work in the last couple of weeks, especially trying to compile requested information to the auditors and get things together. They'll be doing the field work here in our offices next week. Last week was the third meeting of the 6 Mile Halsted Bay Planning Group that was hosted by the City of Victoria at City Hall there. And thank you to managers White and Olson for participating in that. Some of us also had a nice opportunity to meet the new mayor of Victoria just prior to the meeting and kind of update him on some of our past activities and also future plans that are kind of a key. The City of Victoria is a real key part of a lot of those efforts in that 6 Mile Halsted Bay corridor. So it was great to get to know him and meet him and bring him up to speed too. Just yesterday morning, Bowser Board approved our request for a comprehensive plan extension. So it had been, our expiration date was moved from June 27th of 2017 to December 31st of 2017. So that has been processed, just to keep everyone up to date on that. At the request of the board, after we had a meeting kind of focusing on legislative relations in December initially, we talked about creating a one-pager that is a description of who we are and what we do for the watershed districts, especially in light of the, I think it was 44 new legislators that were elected this past fall. And our staff did, with a lot of input from our lobbyist Joel Carlson, from our consultant for public relations John Himley, from several of you, and from a lot of iterations internally with staff too. We did put together kind of the front and back page of this that we'll be using, and this is run off on our printer. We will get some of these printed, and then we also talked about different opportunities to do an electronic version of these that can have some of the photos and images actually be live links to project pages on our website and some of those types of things that we can use going forward. So thank you all for your efforts in helping us with that project as well. We're hosting a presentation. Our Kelly Mamayak and our communication staff put together an opportunity to kind of connect with policymakers again with a State of the River report from the Friends of the Mississippi River. This is going to be on March 8th. We provided some funding for this project, and as a result of that, they have offered to give some kind of customized presentations to us in our watershed. So Trevor Russell from the Friends of Mississippi River will tailor the presentation to indicate indicators that are most relevant to our district and our work that we are doing with them. So you can mark the 8th on your calendars, and we'll be from about 6 to 8 p.m. at the Folkestone building at the in Wayzata, and some more information will be coming out about that soon. And one of the things that we're looking at doing is kind of, in addition to some of the activities and events planned for the 50th anniversary year, is to incorporate some of these kind of not really a lecture, but kind of a public information sessions for certain target audiences to spread word about what we are and what we're doing. Another opportunity that we're going to have as a brown bag lunch for staff, actually in a couple weeks, is Steve Woods from the Freshwater Society is going to talk about the metropolitan watershed laws and how they were implemented, and again, kind of getting that more public information. And we've talked about doing that for a larger public audience later in the spring as well. A joint news release is going to be released next Tuesday on the hybrid milfoil study. We're working together with the University of Minnesota and the Montana State University on that messaging for that project that was done, and that was one of the information items in the packet today. Also, after kind of follow up from the last meeting, we talked about the status of some of our cost share programs, the cost share grants and also Cynthia Creek grants, and there's been an update on our website indicating that those programs are under review and kind of the status of those for the time being, so we can have make sure that the public is aware of the changes, and we'll look for updated versions of those things in the future. Just this coming Saturday, there's a Ski to Big Island and Back event that's hosted. Actually, I think it starts or finishes at Excelsior Brewing. I'm not sure which one, but some of our educational materials will be part of that as well. So they do it.
I don't think we should be a sponsor of that thing, because there may be some big liabilities with being on the end.
We're not a sponsor. We're at this event. We're just sharing some education materials, and the person that's running it has also done the paddle around Big Island event. And initially he had sought us out as a recipient of the proceeds that they were raising for a fundraiser, and we actually directed him to, I believe to the Freshwater Society at that time, because for a local worthy nonprofit organization. Staff will be participating in what's been an annual planning meeting or a staff retreat tomorrow at the Landscape Arboretum. We're going to be focusing on kind of the roles and goals for the coming year. Kind of message and elevator speech development about what we're doing and how we're doing it. So we're kind of working on some of those things, professional development and strengths. And then also have a presentation on equity in parks and natural resource management from some people who have done some research through the Metropolitan Council. And then, since carp is always a popular thing, I wanted to end with a little bit of information about carp. Our staff was out on Wasserman Lake again, and they did a seining of the carp. The estimated population on the lake is about 10,000 carp, which equates to about 76,000 pounds. Today they removed about 2,500, or about 19,000 pounds, or about 25% of the population. So And I didn't bring the images along, but they cut a big kind of open square in the ice and have the nets that come in there. And they had a very large bass and then also a large muskie that they caught there too, but then they released those back in. So if you're looking to catch a big fish, we know there's a couple big ones out there.
Good tip.
And there might be another opportunity to do that again in the future this winter. We're working as part of the Six Mile Creek carp study that's been going on. So that's another opportunity to look at the effectiveness of winter seining. Yes, ma'am.
I also understand that as they caught the carp that were tagged with the electronic devices that allow them to be tracked, that those were put back in so we can continue to monitor.
I believe,
Where they are.
I was told, I think there's 11 or 12 carp that are in that system that were tagged, and they caught 9 of them, which is a high percentage. So those 9, they didn't tag additional fish, but they did release those tagged fish back into the lake again so they can continue to kind of monitor their movements.
Great.
The video online was pretty fun to watch.
Where is it? It was in this, okay, Facebook page.
Oh, I don't know.
I'll send it to you.
It
And-
keeps looping, it's great.
And that's all I
Yeah.
have.
Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.